Let me say it again for the people in the back. The more a Black person attempts to acculturate into white society, the more he or she is likely to feel suicidal ideation with increased attempts on their own lives. So some people may ask why I, a white woman, am talking about Black masculinity. I'm sure people have original ideas or not so original, but I want to explain a little bit. First, just as a baseline, I was raised to see people in vivid detail. This whole I don't see color thing was literally the opposite of how I was raised to interact with others. Everybody has struggles. Everybody is unique, but that also means groups of people are unique. And there are things that make them special, and there are struggles that they have. So, with this background and being raised in that manner, racism has always flummoxed me. It makes no logical sense whatsoever. It's always been something that is a common practice, but doesn't make sense unless you put it in the context of a weapon. So this is something that I've always been interested in and always fought. So with that, where I am right now is I'm a psychotherapist. I have degrees, I have postgraduate work, I have things that have led me down a path of being able to research and have that education and knowledge in. But even bigger than that, why this is a thing for me now is because I work for a mental health crisis center. And in that mental health crisis center, because it's a crisis, the majority of the people that we see are indigent people. So they are unhoused, they are living below poverty line, they may be sheltered, but don't have a place or have no income at all, or they may be coming from the jail. And a vast majority of the people that I see are Black men. Because, as statistics show, and here it's the same way, of the homeless population, a majority of those people are men. And of the homeless men, a disproportionate majority are Black men. Now, we see everyone in the crisis center from all socioeconomic statuses. But what I find is there's so little information about the life of being a Black man in America. So I took it upon myself to be educated. And I've had people along the way to educate me in that. And of course, when you do things like that, it really demonstrates the deep indoctrination. So even though I was raised a certain way, and this has always been a place of interest for me, and always been something for me to fight against, racism, there's so much that I, number one, didn't know that I didn't know, and number two, so much false information that I've been fed. So now, at this point, working in a crisis situation, unfortunately, suicide statistics are really important to me because we need to know the suicide statistics to know the protective factors. So today, we're going to talk about some statistics about Black people, which really makes the case for Black masculinity. Some possible risk factor for Black and African Americans. Black young adults ages 20 to 24 die by suicide at the highest rate for their race, with rates generally declining with age. Psychiatric risk factors can vary by ethnicity for Black adults. Again, Black people are not a monolith. For example, general anxiety disorder has a stronger link to suicidal ideation in African Americans. Divorced and widowed Black Americans are significantly more likely to experience suicidal ideation or thoughts than those who are married or never married at all. Black adults experiencing negative family interactions are at a higher risk for suicidal behavior. Suicidal ideation or thoughts and attempts are associated with increased acculturation into white society. Let me say it again for the people in the back. The more a Black person attempts to acculturate into white society, the more he or she is likely to feel suicidal ideation with increased attempts on their own lives. All right, let's keep going. Black people are less likely to receive psychiatric services for suicidal thoughts and attempts. There are lower suicide rates for African Americans who live in states where they make up a greater percentage of the population. And racial microaggressions are associated with perceived burdensomeness, a risk factor for suicide in African American young adults. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. Lee did a study in 2011 that gave us other possible risk factors. Those risk factors include being under age 35, living in southern or northeastern states, using cocaine, having a firearm at home, and threatening violence against others, which may be in relationship to increased anxiety. There was a survey done in 2015 by Caetano who looked at the gender difference in suicidal ideation or thoughts and attempts. So according to Caetano, the most common precipitating factors for suicide deaths in Black men are intimate partner problems, that was 38.1% of people who died by suicide, experienced a crisis, 36.2%, depressed mood, 30.7%, and current mental health problem, 27.6%. For Black women, the most common precipitating factors for suicide death are current mental health problem, 59.3%, ever treated for mental problem, 53.2%, current treatment for mental illness, 45.1%, depressed mood, 38.2%, history of suicide attempts, 26.7%, and intimate partner problem, 26.4%. If again, we look at racism as a weapon, from buck-breaking during slavery to the way the 13th Amendment is even written, the school-to-prison pipeline, the black codes of the Jim Crow South, the idea of super predators, all of these things have been to emasculate or remove the Black man from the home. Why is that? Possibly it's because the Black man is the greatest protective force of the Black community. So let's talk protective factors. Subjective family closeness and frequency of contact with friends are associated with lower suicidal ideation and attempts for African Americans. A strong sense of African American identity is protective against suicide for African American women. Cultural beliefs against suicide are associated with lower suicide rates. Attending religious services at least once per week is associated with lower suicide attempt rates in African Americans. African American respondents to a study on religious factors associated with suicidality who agreed with the statement, "I look to God for strength, support, and guidance," were also less likely to attempt suicide. So when we look at family closeness and African American identity, those two things are ruptured or fractured with the breaking of the home in trying to emasculate or remove the Black man from the family. But the bigger one I want to talk about is church. Let's talk some stats. In 2008, 22% of all Americans who participated in the cooperative election study indicated that they were atheist, agnostic, or described their religion as nothing in particular. These are also known as none. Just 12 years later, the share of none rose to just over 34%. When that rise is tracked across different racial groups, different patterns come out. For instance, white respondents tracked the national average nearly perfectly with 23% of nuns in 2008, raising to 34% by 2020. With Hispanic respondents, there was an increase of 11 percentage points, but for Asians, who already had the highest percentage of nun, it was modest at 5%. Now, among African Americans, the increase in the share of nun was much larger, more than 15 percentage points. In 2008, African Americans were the least likely to be nun at 19.5%. But by 2020, they were more likely to say that they had no religious affiliation than white or Hispanic respondents at 34.9%. There's no bigger group leaving the Black church than the millennials. The Defender Network did an article looking at the top 5 reasons that Black millennials are leaving the church. The first one is because that they feel that the church is judgmental and unaccepting. Black millennials are looking for practices that are inclusive of sexuality, ancestral practices, and race. The second reason is that Black young adults and teens are opting for religious congregations and faith systems that are more traditional spiritual practices. There are countless faith systems from Africa and across the Pan-African diaspora that young Black people are learning about in school or on their own, and then practicing them on their own. Attacking or demonizing these faiths, which are part of the history of the church, is viewed as the church being closed-minded and unaccepting of new ideas or historical information. The third reason is the perception that the church is anti-intellectual. A longtime minister and divinity school graduate in this article states, when Black people of all levels of intellect and accomplishment enter the church, they are expected to leave their brains in the vestibule. So this critique is about that the Black church is often married to its dogma and traditional practices and chooses not to incorporate new information into the church's body of beliefs. The fourth reason given is the theory of not mixing the sacred with the secular, so being in this world but not of this world. So that means that a lot of times churches were apolitical and not giving political discourse or commentary on the state of the world. The last reason given for Black millennials and young people leaving the church is that they're not there. Their peers are missing, have left, and everyone running the church, all the quote-unquote elders, the pastor, the minister, everyone is older, and their viewpoint or just themselves are missing. So let's go back to those protective factors: the family, identity, and looking to God for strength, support, and guidance. While a Pew Research study said that Black fathers are more than twice as likely as white fathers to live apart from their children, 44% versus 21%. There have been other studies showing that Black non-residential fathers are significantly more likely to spend time and engage in activities with their children as compared to other fathers. Black fathers also shared responsibilities more frequently and displayed more effective co-parenting than Hispanic and white fathers. So this is where we make the connection with Black masculinity, looking for strength, support, and guidance as a protective factor. There are many, many studies on this, too many to name. A quick search on PubMed and you will find all the studies you ever need with every single percentage point you need to demonstrate what fathers bring to the family. One I want to point out from Yoon et al. Is that father involvement is a key family protective factor that is crucial to children's healthy development. There's already been studies suggesting a link between greater father involvement and child positive health, mental health, socioeconomic, academic, and behavioral outcomes. Okay, so let's put it all together. We've talked about the suicide stats, which suicidal thoughts and actions happen when a person is at their greatest amount of overwhelm and their greatest amount of hopelessness. For Black people, the protective factors include family, identity, and strength, support, and guidance. As people are leaving the church in the Black community, something has to take the place of that strength, support, and guidance. As Black fathers are the most involved in their children's lives, they are at a unique position to be able to continue to provide that strength, support, and guidance to kids. And that involvement has been demonstrated time and time again to show greater outcomes for children in the community. So for me, this is even more of an impetus to ensure that Black men are involved with their community, with their families, and with their children. It's such a protective factor. What do you think, guys? Put your comments down below or share your stories. And as always, please subscribe. It's free. Like this content and share where you think it's appropriate. Thanks, guys.